Sekeres Price for Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, coming in from the Nation Network studio built by Armor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you have any designs on coming downtown for an event, why not make it a staycation? Call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates apply. Why were you looking at me like that?
No, I just like to gaze. Sorry.
I felt like someone. I'm like, what did I say? Did I screw something up? He's staring at me during the read.
He's doing a fabulous job. I was in awe.
Find someone who looks at you the way Blake Price looks at Matt Sekeres as we go live.
Just a visage. I have to.
Oh, yeah. It's a visage. All right.
Look at all the light beaming off of him.
That's Blake Price. I'm Matt Sekeres. You've heard Grady Sass. Big show coming up, all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Infinity is in the Richmond Auto Mall, and they've got the 2024 Q50s right now with leasing from, get this, 0%. Stop laughing. It's a great deal. Non-stack cash of $4,000 on select trims as well. It's all good at Applewood.
I have one of those QX Infinities, 55 actually. Gorgeous vehicle, enjoying driving it.
Got it at the Richmond Auto Mall as well.
Blake was very important to me when we first started the show because I didn't have as much radio or broadcast experience as he did, and then suddenly I was in the position of doing all these reads and whatnot. So I'm eternally grateful for the mentorship, the stewardship, the guidance.
I don't trust this at all.
Leadership that Blake Price played in my burgeoning broadcast career.
How much money do you need, Matt? How much money do you need?
Just saying. You're my ride or die.
Oh, God.
Whole question today. A little bit spicy here, too. Should Luke Gazdic be allowed on Hockey Night in Canada when he's such an Oilers fanboy? Yes or no? You can vote. That's Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube.
It's an interesting day today.
Oh, sure is.
Should we just play the clip so people just for the 50% of our audience that didn't see or hear the clip? It's important, and it's part of the Nation Network. It was on Oilers Nation every day out of Edmonton.
Part of the same Nation Network family of podcasts that we've been associated with.
Hosted by Tyler Yaremchuk, who does a fabulous job with it.
We had Tyler on the show a few weeks ago.
We did indeed. Great. Let's let people hear what the comment was. This was right off the top of his hit. I believe the leading question was, "How are you?" And what'd you think of PK Subban's prediction?
Our team's going to the Stanley Cup final. This is a momentous day.
Yeah,
to be.
There was some retort maybe about PK Subban's prediction prior to the Dallas series, but that's about it. It leads to this.
It's awesome, guys. Honestly, it's a great day to be an Oilers fan. I'm happy. I'm also a little fired up too. So I'm going to start there. First of all, PK doesn't know what he's talking about. He went Stars in 6. So PK, put an egg in your shoe, beat it. Second of all, I don't know if Canucks fans listen to this when they were trolling when the Oil absolutely dusted them. They were. My account still will not stop with Canucks trolls. My tweet last night on Twitter just saying congrats Oil Country. I'm going through Instagram message requests here now, and the amount of hate and absolute, it's the most garbage, gibberish trash I've ever seen. Canucks Twitter, you're an absolute joke. Your team's a joke. You're a bunch of losers. So the Oilers are going to the Stanley Cup Finals, and I hope you guys are having fun watching it on TV and watching me on the panel because you guys are not there. So have fun with your little whining tweets, tweeting at me, telling me I'm a homer. The Edmonton Oilers are going to the Stanley Cup Final.
Let's go. Go off, Gaz, as someone just said in the comments. I love that shit so much. Last night.
But you are a homer. You've said you're a homer.
You just that was sort of the admission right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've carved out that identity, that brand.
So as it pertains to the poll question, it brings up some really tough questions because you generally don't have homers on a national broadcast that is trying to appeal to every hockey fan across the country.
Changing a little bit. And of course, there have been exceptions over the years, but yeah.
And we're going to get into the changes, I'm sure, throughout the course of this show. And it certainly is changing. As national media outside of the broadcast begins to disintegrate and local media almost entirely disappears, all you have is outside of guys like us and all you've done what they've done, and those are locally produced things. They are going to be very team specific. Oilers Nation, of course, all parts of the Nation Network, very locally produced, local angles. They are going to be for the fan of that team. But that's not the purview of Hockey Night in Canada. And
not Alberta.
Yes. So that makes it really hard for then Luke Gazdic to go onto a national panel and not seem like he's just trying to skew just to the Oilers fan. Now, the retort will be Kevin Bieksa. And Kevin Bieksa has at times certainly hinted towards an affiliation, a love of the Vancouver Canucks and in his time in Vancouver. I would say at times it's gone too far, but for the most part, I think he checks it. I think he walks that fine line, gets to the narrow path of acknowledging his longtime affiliation with the Vancouver Canucks while not fanning it too much in the face of the other fans across the country. I think Toronto fans love Kevin Bieksa for the most part. I think he appeals to the Eastern fans just fine.
My friends and family back east, and this is a collection of Leafs, Senators, and Habs fans.
Yeah,
they think Bieksa is sensational.
Yeah.
Like, they've asked me a ton of questions. Kevin got to the panel. They've asked me a ton of questions about what Bieksa was like to cover as a player here in Vancouver. And my stock response has been exactly what you're seeing. Like, he was great. Probably had to be a little more guarded as a Canucks player in the room. But effectively, if you had an analytical story you were doing or a feature story and you wanted to go to someone who had insight or could express some views in a colorful way, Bieksa was the guy.
So for anybody saying that Bieksa is the foil, show me a clip of Kevin Bieksa talking like that.
The Edmonton media shot. I got one follower here, Lucas, who's going at me about
this is the media.
What dead, dumb, and whatever.
Yeah,
Bieksa called the Edmonton media, and at least from this seat, I draw a distinction between media members and Canucks fans. Media members take and receive shots all the time. It's a relatively small constituency. The problem that Gazdic has is he's effectively invited Canucks fans to stay away from the jewel product that is the Stanley Cup Final for his employer, Rogers Communications and Sportsnet.
Certainly, and I think,
when you're generalizing and calling a whole fan base losers and a joke, that to me, that's a graver sin than taking a shot at a city's media base, which happens all the time.
Media base could give a rat's ass that Bieksa poked a hole at that. I think you're welcome to poke holes at the Canucks media. In fact, we took it big time in 2011. Like, it was crazy.
Blake, we've been taking it for 13 years.
But to say your team is a joke, now how do you cover the Vancouver Canucks next season? And they've had Luke Gazdic on regional broadcast at the intermission with Caroline Cameron covering the Vancouver Canucks, who you've just said are a joke of a team.
And he's on the rights holder radio station here in Vancouver.
So,
doing hits.
So that makes things a lot more difficult. If he was just doing Oilers regional games, zero problem.
And did
nothing.
Did the Oilers dust the Canucks? Because last time I checked, it
was
a
one
goal game in Game 7.
Yeah, and the Canucks actually had them on the ropes for 2 games.
Yes,
not the other way around. So yeah, and that also just strains credibility as well. Are you actually paying attention to the series when you're saying they absolutely dusted them? Considering third string goaltender, like, that's not an accurate depiction of what that series looked like.
Grady,
so yeah.
Grady, we want to get to welcome Matt here.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. I don't know if it was malicious. Probably not. But I do know it was another WTF moment. My question to ownership would be, was it worth it? And the architect And I use that term loosely, given there wasn't much architecture, more finger painting with this team. It's like the running of the bulls in Pamplona. You know someone is going to get hurt.
That's what you all need to understand here, right now.
There's no staring at me, okay? You look
We should
straight to camera.
Put a voter booth.
We're having the conversation to that camera. I don't want to feel any eyes on my peripherals.
Doesn't like to get watched.
Not by you. Not from that vantage point.
Are we going full
Not
screen?
side eye.
Oh, you get lots of side eye, trust me.
Not just here. So first of all, very happy that Luke Gastic has found a second career. And until this week, I think you could say he was better at casting than hockey. He's a Nevada Oilers fan, but what I'll say, he's a good communicator. He's unafraid to criticize. Those are two big things for ex-jocks when they get into the media. He's got some charisma, personality as well. That works. Sure. Yeah. But he's still a rookie in this realm, and that showed Monday. We just played the clip. Don't have to go over it again. But this is the first time this franchise has been in the Stanley Cup final in 18 years. And to be fair to his credit, he says, hey, great day to be an Oiler. You know, the pivot so quickly to Canucks Twitter. You know, I'm fired up and let's start there. And hey, if you want to lance with PK Subban, your old buddy or whatnot, hey, have at it. But the line that got me, your team's a joke, or the paragraph that got me, your team's a joke, you're a bunch of losers, so the Oilers are going to the Stanley Cup finals. I believe it is singular there, final. And I hope you have fun watching it on TV and watching me on the panel. Oh, that was almost full wrestling heel. You know? The only thing that was missing, I know you are, but what am I? I'm just glad he stopped short of nana nana boo boo. Not exactly professional behavior from a new media professional. Let's for a moment ignore that we have a Hockey Night in Canada panelist who has staked emotional allegiance in one team. And Gastic played 136 games for the Oilers. So, you know, once an Oiler, always an Oiler, I guess. And sadly, much as we'd like Hockey Night in Canada to be an impartial pan-Canadian institution, we know it's not. Don Cherry was a Bruins fan, then a Leafs fan. Ken BX leans Canucks. If you want to argue that the business is headed that way and that the line between fanboy and commentator is blurring, I'd argue that's for the worse, but that's altogether another matter. The matter at hand is Gastic going out of his way to take unprompted shots at hockey fans of a different stripe and not rising to the level of decorum that should be required to sit on a Hockey Night in Canada panel. And I'll bet the Canucks have already broached that matter with Sportsnet. Lots of rabbit ears at Rogers Arena. Believe you us, we know. And I'd like to think that a strong Hockey Night in Canada executive producer would have already talked to Gastic about it. I know John Shannon would. We got John coming up. Sadly, not many John Shannons in television anymore. So if Gastic wants to, you know, sound cool on a podcast and throw some fresh meat to Oilers fans, I get it. And I'm also sure some of the accounts in his mentions and his aforementioned mentions went over the line in his replies. Again, been there, have long experience on that file. As a media person with your own, and let's face it, usually much larger forum, it's part of the job. And I didn't take to this immediately when I moved behind a microphone. Blake can attest. But I've been there now for a while. You've got two options. Read it and let it roll off your back, or don't read it. And to be fair, you know, we've all been guilty in the past. Blake, you and I, we've fought inbox wars.
I used to get riled up. Oh,
my God.
Yeah.
There were days I'd have to turn to him and say, enough with in the inbox, like we're doing a show here.
I would never partake in such thing.
We've lanced with Twitter users before. And it comes with inexperience, and it often amounts to punching down. Got to rise above. And hopefully media newbie Gastic learns this lesson. For the moment, though, maybe he's too emotionally invested to cover this series coherently, because it should be about the Oilers and the Florida Panthers, not dunking on third-party fans with grade school taunts. At minimum, he needs a course on editorial judgment, because there are plenty of Canucks fans who are going to enjoy watching the final on TV, and they'd enjoy it a lot more without Gastic. So welcome, Matt, for today. Invite your feedback channels, email live at sekeresprice.com, text 778-402-9680. It's the Great Clips text message inbox on Twitter. I'm at Sekeres Price. Welcome at a presentation on Northlands Golf Course. 90-day bookings available. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue, lock in your dates for a $10 per player booking fee, limited daily availability. Go to golfnorthlands.com. Yeah, maybe you just sit this one out.
Yeah,
maybe Hockey Night goes, you know what, Luke? Like, you're new here. You're an Oilers fan. You've already pissed off one segment of the fan base. Pretty big market too. Maybe just cool your jets a little, and we'll see you next year.
He keeps referring to them as we, if he still plays on the team.
I know.
That shit drives me nuts.
To me, there's two cardinal sins made in his clip. One is the we. He says he stops himself after he says it and then reconfigures, but elsewhere he says we all the time. Yeah. He says we, you never say we.
Well, I mean, but again, that's on his producers. Like, that's the one thing they got to sit him down. Like a John Shannon would have done this months ago and said, look, Luke, you're not Paul Bissonnette. I know Bissonnette likes to cheer for the Leafs and Lance with different, fan bases, but, Bissonnette came to that job via his own media.
And he was already like that. They knew what they were signing up at TNT.
Yeah, like, believe it or not everybody can be Charles Barkley or Paul Bissonnette, and really, one is enough.
Yeah.
So drop the we. You're not an Edmonton Oiler anymore, and you've got to be able to cover these games through a lens of neutrality.
Secondly, he targets the team, and that's also a dangerous one because as you say, they are so sensitive over there at Rogers Arena, that I wouldn't be surprised if one of the higher ups has broken off a call and said, I thought we were partners and you got guys calling our team a joke. Again, just factually too, after a narrow 7-game series. I mean, it's a
joke that was better through 82 games than the Edmonton Oilers.
And 6 of the 7 games decided by a goal. Like, there's absolutely dusted again. You're looking for credibility. It's why Ray Ferraro resonated with fans of most colors, I think, is that just smart, reasoned takes. That's why we love Frank Corrado. Frank Corrado can speak for days. Do you ever hear Frank Corrado go, oh, the freaking Leafs are so good? Now, he talks Leafs because he is around them a lot. Yeah, but he's never fawning the Leafs or fawning the Vancouver Canucks, the 2 teams that he played for.
Honestly, Blake, Ferraro's a great example because we have long history with him. But when we started the show, the Canucks were a really good team back 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And we would have fawning discussions with Ray about, did you see that pass from Henrik? Or how about that save from Roberto? Or whatever the case was. More often than not, we were talking about the excellence that we saw on the ice on a night-to-night basis.
And you're allowed to do that.
And then the Canucks went wandering in the woods, right? And what was Ray's famous phrase?
The no plan.
And we talked for years about an organization that had no plan, that had no direction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
but the
guys like that who can, stick handle the reality of the situation and communicate effectively and insightfully and oftentimes comedically, are fantastic for this business. That's who people want to hear from.
But in some ways, the changing face of this sport is intertwined into this story, or sports media is intertwined in this story. Because back in my day, if you will, allow me, as a man in his 40s still.
Barely in his 40s, ladies and gentlemen. Barely in his 40s.
I've still got months to go.
Big one coming up.
Big
one coming up this December. Can't wait.
Hey, you know whose birthday is today?
Whose?
Mine.
No.
Oh, really?
Is it really?
Yeah. Oh, how about that?
Happy birthday, Grady.
I almost forgot it myself.
26 years of age.
You know you're old when you forget your birthday. There have been many times in my career that I've just sort of worked through my birthday and got to the end of the workday and went, oh, yeah, it's my birthday.
I love those birthdays. That's my favorite. Anyhow, back in my day, you'd never have seen an anchor open up a Sports Center or Sports Central, or what was it called before Connected, and lamenting the loss for the Blue Jays or the Raptors or the Leafs. Happens routinely now.
Yeah. And honestly,
like
Blake,
it's just strictly verboten, like and never, not once. You tune into ESPN Sports Center with an ER and tell me how many times they've opened up Sports Center with an ER with can't believe the Yankees lost.
Yeah.
Never has happened. Won't ever happen. Scott Van Pelt's not going to open up going, oh, the Giants, man. Like it doesn't happen, folks. Objectivity. That's the way you cover anything, news, sports, at a national level. Now you can get a little bit more creative at the local level for sure. And the fact that Gazdic was on a local podcast is maybe what in his mind allowed him to go there.
But he's still a representative.
You're a
Hockey Night
representative, and they'll
Canada.
tell you that up the yin yang, and still to this very day, no matter where you're appearing, you're Sportsnet's Luke Gazdic, and that's what he has to remember the next time he's on a local show.
For me, it really changed, and there is a bit of a difference in this country to the ESPN Sports Centers, the ERs, the Van Pelts. With one Major League Baseball team and one NBA team, they have pan-Canadian followings. You're covering that team much more than you're covering the rest of those leagues. But those are the two places where it really started to change, or at least where I saw the pronounced change. The Blue Jays in particular, when they made their two playoff appearances after going 20 years without making the playoffs, longest drought in the majors. And of course, what happened intermittently between those two events is that Rogers Communications bought the Blue Jays, and through every game on Sportsnet, coast to coast, which was a smart business play. As a matter of fact, was a intern at the Globe in Toronto covered that story. It was the last story I covered in my internship. Is, oh my God, Ted Rogers is buying the Blue Jays. How about that? I can remember Ted coming down press row of the Blue Jays home opener the next year, glad handing everyone, just absolutely beaming, that they had acquired this property. So the Blue Jays, and to a lesser degree, the Raptors, became sort of Canada's team. And boy, just the way they started to be covered, particularly out of Toronto, particularly by the two networks and on SportsCenter, as you say, like the news and information show. Not the columnist part of the newspaper, but the news stories.
Also geolocating themselves as being in Toronto
at some point. And look, I know there's now cross-media pollination and ownership of the Raptors as well through MLSE, but
geolocating themselves as out of, like, I'd hear anchors say, "Oh, this newsroom was just a buzz. Here's the Raptors or the Jays or whatever we're playing." Like, you don't geolocate. Like, does anybody, like, there's a lot of people that don't know that ESPN's based in Connecticut.
Right. And the other thing that I would say
you have
is,
fans
I guess,
of the team working in the newsroom.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you have managers who have a duality to their role, who have to be sensitive, or at least feel they have to be sensitive to the corporate pursuits of their overlords. And that filters down.
But Grady, those employees' fandoms can't be of public record.
No,
like that shouldn't be abundantly clear to the person watching.
No,
it's supposed to be a show for all fans of all teams.
And then they label their network as Canada's sports leader.
So, what I wish, as I said in the editorial, I wish there were more John Shannons, and you'll hear from John later in the program and what he had to say about his years running Hockey Night in Canada, that you need that strong editorial executive to put the journalists, put the content people in the bomb shelter and say, we're going to do our job and report and do commentary as merits without any kind of interference or without any kind of consideration from what are the bigger, larger corporate pursuits of the company. If there is, ownership, cross ownership between the media institution and the team or leagues itself.
And it's a squiggly line. Toymaker on YouTube says Ray Whitney can get away with it. You mean Ryan? Ryan Whitney can get away with it, but agree Gazdic should not because he is on the air. Yeah, spitting chicklets. I mean, that's a separate enterprise. It's a very niche podcast where they are based on pure personality, not by any sort of obligation to cover the sport evenly. They're not under that obligation.
Well, yes, the other distinction being the public airwaves. I know we're now digital, but same underpinning logic. the public airways are in fact public. Companies license them from all of us.
Yeah.
So there is a greater responsibility there than if you want to start your own digital product, which we've done, where you aren't licensing anything from anyone.
And if Spit and Chicklets or Barstool had the rights to broadcast NHL hockey games like Sportsnet does, it would be a different conversation.
Matt says a lot of Canucks fans don't know how to take an L, frankly. I was devastated when we lost, but seriously, go touch grass. Media professionals like Gazdic should be held to a standard. But chill, folks. Matt, no one's going to lose sleep over this. I don't think anybody's going to have to go on a run to blow off steam here.
Yeah.
But it is a topic, and so we're going to discuss it.
Yeah.
But yeah, is it going to change my life? It is not.
No. And having said that, let's move along to our top story. Martin HS, Carolina winger. Frank Saravelli would not be surprised if he is on the move before Saturday's Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. In fact, he name-checked 3 suitors, including your Vancouver Canucks, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Calgary Flames. Now, Elliot Friedman today on the sports side said he didn't think Philip Hronek alone gets the deal done, which is different than what Darren Dreger of TSN said, because Darren Dreger said Carolina is seeking a number 3, number 4 defenseman, basically a second pair defenseman, and Hronek is every bit of
Except
that.
Dreger's words were a number 3 or 4 defenseman with term.
Right.
Now, Hronek is not that guy for sure because he has no term.
Well, I mean, unless you want to give him term.
Right.
But it could very well be that Carolina looks at it and says, Vancouver, there is the basis of a trade here. The problem is your guy's probably going to go into arbitration and restricted free agency, and we get him for 1 year, whereas you're going to be able to re-sign HS to a longer term deal, which is perhaps why Elliott also added that Carolina may be seeking prospects too, which is interesting because they've got a decent prospect pool already, although it is thinning out some. And it also, you wonder whether it's signaling a different direction for the Carolina Hurricanes. And there's been a lot of talk about that with Don Waddell no longer there, with Pavelski now moving up, or at least getting more of the decision-making, and with interviews ongoing.
But all these UFAs, aging captain, all that sort of stuff,
I mean, I would think that Carolina is not going towards a rebuild here, but
a retool, maybe.
A retool.
1 year step back, maybe.
And
might be needed.
And including maybe looking at it going, okay, like we haven't been the largest trader of future assets out there at deadline after deadline, offseason after offseason, but we have moved off enough young pieces and draft picks that it's time to start refilling the kitty, because let's face it, that is not typically a team that's going to, spend into LTIR, or at least not loads into LTIR. They have been a team that has done it a little more economically, with a little more ingenuity and a little more creatively than other franchises. He's a hell of a player, and he skates damn well, and he can score goals. But if you're the Vancouver Canucks, you have to weigh the cost of acquisition and then what you're giving him contract-wise. And again, sight unseen, not knowing if he works with JT Miller, not knowing if he works with Elias Pettersson. There are a lot of good players who just go into situations with particular coaches or particular line mates or teams, and it just doesn't work out. So as we sit here today, and Saravelli also reporting that there is no shortage of interest in HS. He name-checked 3 teams, but many more are interested in the player.
David Pagnotta name-checked about 6 teams on the NHL Network, and the Canucks are not one of them. So,
I understand. Yeah.
So it proves the point that you could have half the league calling the Hurricanes on this deal.
And then of course it's a matter of what would the Canucks trade, because again, I know fans are some upset with Philip Hronek, but I'm not sure management is looking to move off the player, given what they gave up for him, which was a high acquisition cost, and given how difficult it is to replace a top pair right side all situations defenseman just period, let alone one that works so well with Quinn Hughes.
And you had
in the first
defensive rebuild, not rebuild, but improvement on your mind anyway going into this offseason. If you have one depart, it just adds one more to your to-do list. If any of these Roenick trade possibilities, again, can be kicked down the road to July 7th, and you see what you come up with in free agency, well, then by all means. But it would be a bold move at the draft.
Yeah.
Or now this week to make a deal involving Philip Roenick, not knowing what lies ahead.
The other thing that Saravelli said yesterday, which I think is astute, is that he expects some business to get done here this week before the Cup final. I saw a piece in The Athletic, I think it was Pierre LeBrun, talking to Bill Zito, the Florida Panthers general manager, who gave a great answer because Blake, they're having their pro meetings during game 1 and game 2 of the Stanley Cup final. And he said
nothing else to do.
He said something along the lines of, if the biggest problem I have is a short runway to after the end of this series to the draft and free agency, then, so be it. I'd love to be in the position because it means we're still playing, right? We still got a chance to play for the Stanley Cup. But it is an extraordinarily short runway if the Stanley Cup gets to 7 games and plays that game on June 24th. I mean, we've been talking about cramming in an award show, but the draft on the 28th, we've even talked about, is everyone going to make the Stanley Cup parade if this is the case, all the scouting staff and upper management, front office types.
But Matt, I would guess this week is getting a lot of work done too.
Well, so which was what I was about to say. Whether things get consummated and announced this week or not, I would suspect that you will have things that get done.
Foundational work being done right now.
Signed contract in a drawer sort of thing to be announced or handshake trade announced at a later date. You don't, the league doesn't typically love especially big trades taking some shine off the Stanley Cup final. I would have to think that even in the, even in the minds of Gary Bettman and Bill Daly et al., they didn't go, well, we can understand things are a little different this year, given how deep into June the calendar is going and given how little runway there is.
I mean, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday here this week, I think all bets are off. I mean, if you want to announce something.
Friday, yeah.
I mean, Friday's probably a media day of some sort.
Thursday, I think, will be a media day.
You think so? Yeah. There'll be some access and some things announced. But I bet you Gary speaks on Friday would be my guess.
Usually does, yeah, day before or a day of sometimes.
Yeah. So those moments they don't want overshadowed, but you've got some days to work on some things, and whether it's right to the final nth degree, the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, or just hey, let's get back to this. But are we talking the same language on this? So that it's shorter work when the season is over.
If Gary speaks Friday, I'm sure it's because he feels there's some things to crow about, including the Utah Hockey Club. If he speaks Saturday, it probably tells you, oh, he's worried about a couple of the questions that are coming. Maybe we'll get lost in coverage of the game.
Sarah Valley's note on the Utah Hockey Club that he's of the mind that there will be no logo or team name announced this year.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they didn't think they had enough time to get it all together in time for the opener.
And what a miss. I was critical of the PWHL when that happened. Critical here, there too. You've got a year of enthusiastic shoppers that will be scooping that merchandise off the shelf, and they're not doing it.
Also on Utah, and this maybe ties back to NHS, if Carolina is willing to just go the prospect route on NHS, teams like Utah with $40 million in cap space, prospects and draft picks galore, they're in the equation as much as the contenders or the teams that are looking to get, or a step shy and looking to become contenders, perhaps like the Vancouver Canucks. But, we've talked a lot in the last week and a half about Vancouver and Carolina are two franchises to watch this offseason based on the UFAs, RFAs they have, not to mention, their most recent history of getting to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs in Carolina's case. Getting there again and wanting to get over. And in Vancouver's case, learning the lesson and wanting to take the next step. But Utah with that cap space, because that was the thing in Arizona is the owner just didn't want to spend money to a certain level, which is why, you took on these dead money contracts to get up to the salary cap floor and LTI. This Utah owner, Ryan Smith, he is willing.
He could sign a bunch of UFAs.
He really could. Like suddenly, and to some degree, it's almost great that they're out of the Canucks division from the standpoint of the Vancouver Canucks and their fans, because this team now in Utah is finally willing to spend and compete with the big boys in the National Hockey League. So let the Central Division deal with them, because of course, once upon a time, the Arizona Coyotes were in the Pacific Division before the Seattle Kraken got here, and they got bumped on over. So Utah will be a big, not just the new team and lack of name, but the specific hockey operations task in front of them suddenly with a windfall of money that they never had before.
Toy Maker in the YouTube comments, Utah Generics with the 2025 Cup. Can you imagine Cinderella run for Utah? Just Utah.
Want to get to the same McIntyre column on Sportsnet with Nikita Zadorov, and first of all, I saw Dan Murphy and very funny tweets on the golf course yesterday with Nikita Zadorov and JT Miller saying, "Hey, gave it his best shot,"
which is mostly nothing, but I will say that, and yeah, McIntyre's column on wanting to set roots down. I mean, he's not blowing town, still hanging around. Still putting up with a rainy May.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when your off-season home's Miami.
Yeah.
Although it might be even too hot in Miami now. June's a steamy month down there. But that is, to me, that said something. Not that Murph's in his ear. I mean, that's just fun and game. But that he's still here.
Yeah. I don't say, I mean,
I don't know. Is he waiting out kids for his school wise?
It could be. It could be. But
that's a good sign.
I still think it means something. Mm-hmm. It means it could be incremental.
Well, he was with his family last week touring Victoria. So,
yeah.
So and talked about in the piece, much as he talked about all throughout the course of the year, this family is really taken to this community, that they really have enjoyed exploring Vancouver and British Columbia.
And let's not forget, he has bounced around quite a bit for
five franchises, right?
Not only that, Grady, but as McIntyre outlines, with what he said about Vladimir Putin, the invasion of Ukraine, they ain't going back to Russia anytime soon. I mean, months ago, he joked that they'd send him to Siberia. More sadly, when he first started talking about this, he also allowed that him on the other side of where his family back home in Russia is at on the matter, and has cost relationships there, which, further, I think, underlines the bravery and the sacrifice that Nikita Zadorov has made in speaking out on these matters. Really, not the only NHLer to do so, but certainly the loudest NHLer.
And by virtue of his performance on the ice, which has always been good, but never as great as it just was, save for the 14-goal performance as a Calgary Flame, which was good, but of course didn't follow up with any playoff performance. He's never been a folk hero before.
No.
He's never been
very good point.
Easily walked down the street, easily recognized walking down the street. He's never been adored by a fan base like he was here. That probably feels pretty cool for a guy. He's not at the end of his career, but I mean, this is the last couple chapters of his career. So I probably feels pretty good.
Believe it or not, I think he likes the attention.
Yeah. I think
I don't think this is a play. Yeah. I right down to the fashion and the garb, right?
Yeah.
I don't think this is a guy who's looking to slink into the anonymity of a Sunbelt market, because of all the things that you get. And I know we began this show talking about Gastic and Canucks Twitter and the latest calling it toxic. The flip side of this market is that you're beloved when things go well. You don't get that in Miami.
And he's had like a decade in the NHL of knowing what that feels like. He's played in markets where he can go to the store and not get recognized, and it's all A-okay.
Now, after a
lot of teams where they were not very good either, right? So he probably really enjoys the spotlight, but as well as winning.
Yeah.
That matters.
As he told McIntyre at Locker Cleanout Day, term is most important for him. So you basically start with the big term and you work back on the salary, I think, if you're the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
Here's the quote he gave to McIntyre. He said, "I feel like I can play until 35 or 36 easily on a high level. I think my body can do that. It's not like I'm injury prone. I feel like I can get to another level of leadership in hockey as well when I know I'm in this team long term. It's just going to be easier mentally and physically as well, so I don't have to move my family around."
I think that's his recognition that everybody and their dog is going to be comfortable offering him 5 years.
Right.
So this is his way of saying
Go to 6.
Yeah.
But of course, if you go to 6, you can probably bring down that average annual value, which may work cap-wise for the Canucks. Now, again, the bridge to cross here is, are you willing to pay a third left side defenseman when you've got holes elsewhere in the lineup? You're paying PD more. You'll be paying Roenick more. You've got to re-sign Myers. You want some depth on offense. And of course, you have to improve this winger group, if not third line center as well, with Elias Lindholm going, likely departing. So you have a lot of masters to serve here if you're Patrick Allvin, and not a lot of henchmen to do that. The other quote from Zadorov that stuck out, he said, obviously there's a lot of interest in the family stuff, but the main interest is to win the Stanley Cup. This was my 5th playoff, and I haven't been past the second round. I think for me, it's just to find a team or home where I have a chance to win a Stanley Cup, and the main focus for sure. That's the main focus for sure, and I believe Vancouver is one of them. Just reading between the lines, I wonder if the Canucks can get close. Well, his experience here since November and the trade, will that tip the balance for the Canucks? If maybe they're not the richest offer, but they match on term, and he and the family know we love the community, the team's pretty good and has a chance to compete, it ticks every box. Let's not go see if the grass is greener somewhere else.
Yeah, I think there's
4 or 5.
I think all that stuff is a certified tiebreaker for them. But the question is it worth dollars? Does it actually make up ground on a superior offer from somebody else? That's the question.
It's a good question.
I still think ultimately the dollars will probably be too far apart for that to be a coupon that the Vancouver Canucks can use. Would you do 6 years? If it meant $1 million off the cap hit, would you do 6 years?
I'd consider it. Yeah. I mean, for me, my priorities are Philip Roenick or a top pair right side, all situations defenseman, and another scoring winger.
6 years at $5 million.
Yeah, I'd consider that. Yep.
Thing to remember there is you'd have to believe that in years 5 or 6 is a $5 million defenseman on your third pair almost a deal. Not a deal, but reasonable at the very least.
I mean, that's if he ages appropriately.
Yeah.
And with the cap
expected
to go up.
But for me, see, if I'm Allvin and Rutherford, I really want to get the Roenick business done. It's the same logic that you threw at Elias Pettersson about knowing where you stood with him going forward cap-wise. You want to know the Roenick number, and then you work from there on your other guys. So it's a harder question to answer, but I would, yes, to answer your question, I would consider that level. Mike Yeo, Nolan Baumgartner, our old friends. The band is getting back together. The Travis Green Lonely Hearts Club band is getting back together in our nation's capital. They are announced as Senators' assistant coaches. We knew Yeo had some irons in the fire when he was not retained by the Vancouver Canucks, and we know that Bomber is very close with Travis Green.
Funny how posses find a way to get back together, right?
I've had a lot of emails, calls from my friends in the nation's capital who are a little down on the Travis Green hire. And put it this way, now I guess this is his third go round because he was the interim in New Jersey. I would like to think that Travis is a smart enough guy to understand some of the mistakes he made and become a better head coach because of that experience.
From our interactions with him, I think he's a pretty astute guy. And I
He's
think
a very astute
and I
guy.
think he's
a very astute
and
guy.
I think he wants to, I think that because he would risk having this being his last stop if it doesn't go well.
Exactly.
So I think he's got every motivation to figure out new ways to do old problems and hey, you've got great assistance in that you know, and I don't know necessarily the X's and O's prowess of Nolan, but he's of course a huge people person.
Oh my goodness. There is no bigger people person.
Yeah, and I think Yo is a little bit of each. I think he's pretty well rounded.
Yeah.
And so is Travis, for that matter. I think Travis has found a way to become more well rounded.
That was one of the things I said to my media friends in Ottawa is I just hope he doesn't go in there determined to be the serious, dour first-time NHL head coach that we got.
Yeah, I don't think
because there's actually a lighter, brighter. Like he's not a talkative guy, Travis. Like he's not a big, outgoing personality.
No, but we had some laughs with him
like that.
Yeah.
But you know, there is a
poker face.
There is a more holistic, you know, human being than I think we saw at times here in Vancouver. And that's a market, a small market where you go in, and if you understand you're the coach of Pleasantville and behave that way, you're going to bring a lot of people on side.
When we got him with his guard down in preseason and all that sort of stuff, he was very good. So if he can make that a little bit more of a full time, and you can bet Travis Green's he's watching the league. He watches guys like Brindamore. He watches guys like Tocchet, and he's of their vintage, right? Yeah. Like I'm sure he sees, they're having a lot of success doing this. So I would suspect he tries to emulate that.
Joe Pavelski is retiring after 1,533 NHL games. And yes, I count postseason in that, 201 of them, including 19 this year. 1,068 regular season points. Little Joe, as he was known in San Jose for all those years, just a superb career. Almost a career that on availability and totality of points, there's a case to be made for the Hall of Fame there.
Oh, I think because of the fact he's American too, I think he...
you think he's getting in?
I think he gets in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, there were many nights, San Jose and in Dallas, where you watch him and go, boy, he would fit in really well on this team, really any team, with his penchant.
Some of the best
for being in the right place at the right time. I mean, to play the game for that long at that size and be that effective is truly achievable.
It's too bad he didn't squeeze out one more because he would have got to 500 goals, right?
He's kind of a magic marker.
He's 24 short. One more season, you think he gets to 12.
And how about this? The BC Lions have effectively sold out BC Place for the home opener. As of an hour or so ago, a couple hours ago, there are only single seats remaining in the upper bowl of BC Place for the June 15th home opener against the Calgary Stampeders, featuring, of course, the 50 Cent pregame concert. What an extraordinary response from this community, and what a way to kick off the BC Lions season. To think, I mean, Dwayne Venot said he would be happy with 40. Blake, he may go 20 past the 53,000 that turned out for One Republic or LL Cool J.
And the good news is, like even if you let's play worst case scenario, 15,000 people say they don't want to stick around for the football game. You still got 40K left over. Like it's going to be pretty impossible to have.
Hell of a scene.
Pretty impossible to have a great atmosphere for the game itself. It's going to be fabulous.
All right. To today's menu, it's brought to you by Greta 50 West Cordova. It is a fantastic spot to watch the game, or if you're going to a game, pregame, or if you're leaving the stadium, postgame, plus the arcade, one of the great arcades in Vancouver. And halftime, intermissions, you want to identify which game you're going to play and arrive there early. That was my lesson from doing all those watch parties at Greta. People knew which machine they were going to, and they made a beeline for it as soon as the horn sounded. 50 West Cordova, GretaBart.com. We have John Shannon on the program today. It just so worked out this way, actually.
Yeah,
like we
not
did
planned.
not really plan this, but when we started prepping today's show, we went, this Gastic character seems to be generating a lot of buzz with Canucks fans. And so we bring John in and ask him all the relevant questions here as the guy who ran Hockey Night in Canada for years and years and years and years. So fantastic conversation coming up with John. Time now for Bet365 bets of the day. Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. And Blake, Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the French Open in advance of his quarterfinal. Went to 5 sets in the fourth round. Was not 100% healthy, and sure enough, pulled out today. Meaning, Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner now look much better to win the tournament, right? The second and third seeds. Sinner is already through to the semis. And you know what? Just might be his time. You know, had a little bit of a scare against the Frenchman earlier this week when the Frenchman, with all the crowd behind him, won the first set. Almost thought a Jimmy Connor story or something like that was happening. But Sinner bared down and won the match easily from thereafter. Seems like his time. So I'm going to take the big Italian, a plus 200.
This is a bit of a future pick here. Looking ahead to the first game of Copa America for the Canadian men's national team.
When is that now?
June 20th, I want to say.
Okay, and they have the Netherlands on Thursday. That's just a friendly?
Friendly.
Okay.
Saturday versus France. No, Sunday versus France. And then June 20th versus Argentina. Think about that triple header for the Canadian men's national team. Netherlands, France, Argentina. That sounds like a group of death at the World Cup.
And on behalf of the 51,000 at BC Place, we need a good, clean slide tackle on Lionel Messi.
Well, honest to goodness, of the three, Netherlands, France, Argentina, Argentina might be the easiest out of the bunch.
Are the Netherlands back to being that good?
Well, they're always a force to be reckoned with, and Argentina is getting older. Lionel Messi's not alone in that. So I don't know if there's a bunch of great new blood being brought in, but based on the World Cup winning team, Canada's at plus 750. And of course, if there is a prominent Argentinian injury prior to this match, that number will only go down. So, hey, just put a little something at plus 750.
Sprinkle.
And it all of a sudden gets to be a pretty big number quick.
Is Van Persie walking through that door? Is Robin walking through that door?
Wesley Schneider.
Is Bergkamp walking through that door?
Edgar Davids.
Grady, who you got on Thursday there? Huh?
What game?
Netherlands versus Canada. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Big soccer guy over
Pick your fighter.
Football.
Yeah.
Open an account with Bet365. Make a bet.
You just dodged the question.
Bet on a huge range of
Draw.
markets. Just don't stare at me. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS altogether, all one word. John Shannon is next.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com. In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. GolfNorthlands.com. Everybody knows about the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis.
But what's less known is that the stigma around addiction makes it harder to ask for help.
And that's got to stop. Addiction is a complex health condition, not a choice.
Right, and that means people shouldn't have to face judgment at work or from their loved ones or fear the law.
But shame or stigma can cause a person to hide their drug use or use alone.
And we don't want that. People shouldn't be afraid to reach out.
There are supports available, and it helps to know where to start.
The government of BC is partnering with organizations like Sekeres Price to help extend this message throughout our province.
If you or someone you know is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. You can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on the Help Starts Here website. Our next guest is brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club, reminding you that tee times for any time during the 2024 season can be booked online right now. Get those tee times reserved well in advance to avoid disappointment. And if you have a group of 12 or more, enter Arnie's Army Golf Getaway, where you and 11 friends could play for free. What a fantastic offer. To book a tee time or to enter the Arnie's Army Golf Getaway, the contest, visit whistlergolf.com. Joining us now is the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCowan podcast, our weekly regular, the one and only Mr. John Shannon. How are you?
I'm great. So as a kid, and there's lots of people of other generations had the Tiger Phil Mickelson rivalry. It was the Jack Arnie rivalry for me as a kid, and I was a member of Arnie's Army. In fact, to this day, because of Arnold Palmer, I putt a certain way.
Do you really? The punch putting?
I have never forgotten how Arnold. I read his book. I have putted the same way for a long period of time. I pigeon toe my shoes, just like Arnie did. Bend the knee, do the whole thing.
But the little punch stroke,
Stab at it.
Stab.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And my pal Ian Lake will tell you, not a bad putter.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be critical of that style if I could putt myself. So
Make a putt.
Well, and if we play Fairview Mountain Boys, everything just breaks to the valley anyway. So you got to learn how to read.
That's right. That's right. Hoping to see you in Oliver at some point this summer.
Yes, sir.
Hey, John, we want you to put your executive producer hat on here.
yeah, the timing today is perfect.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm not sure if you heard it, but Luke Gastick went on a Oilers podcast and one here in the Nation Network family. And, on top of talking about the Oilers going to the Stanley Cup final, he seemed more concerned with lancing with Canucks fans who were all in his mentions, Twitter, Instagram,
which is fine.
Which
is fine.
But having sort of avowed fans of a certain team on the Hockey Night in Canada panel, talk to me about that, because it didn't seem to happen outside of Grapes, who was kind of his entity unto himself when you were running the show. What do you make of what's become now of the business where people sit there on panels on national broadcasters and call themselves fans of a certain team?
Well, I don't like it because I think that if you are on a television network, there should be some level of impartiality, because you're not just speaking to Oiler fans or Canuck fans, but we're seeing it all over the place. Mark Messier is a friend of mine, but Mark Messier was, cheering for the Rangers to get to Game 7 against Florida. People are going to be mad at me for saying this, but it's almost like I'm not sure what they know what to say next, so they become fans again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes part of the shtick. And I don't think it should be part of the shtick. I think we should be sitting down and from an unbiased viewer's perspective, being able to sit and communicate and tell stories about the game, whether that's a Edmonton Oiler or whether that's a Vancouver Canuck or a Florida Panther. So it bothers me. It bothers me a lot. But nobody's asking me my opinion other than the two of you, and so thank you very much.
Did you ever have to?
They should ask her.
Did you ever have to guide any of your color analysts? I mean, there wasn't a ton of who would have been? Was there ever an ex-player on an '80s panel along with Hodge and such? So, did you have ex-players on the panels at that point?
The first time, I tell you what, the first time we brought in my time there, a couple times. Well, 1985, the Canucks were eliminated. We did the Edmonton LA series. I flew Harry down from Vancouver to work as our analyst. So that was a Vancouver guy talking about LA and Edmonton because he had coached 16 games against them. So there was something like that,
Did you ever have to tell those guys, don't be subjective? Like try to approach. Did you have to guide them, or did they know
Oh, yeah.
instinctively? Because I just don't remember them.
No, you spend time with them.
Yeah.
You spend time with them and say, hey, listen, here's what our expectation is of you. We want to, you're here not to give us the A, B, and C's of broadcasting. You're here to give us the A, B, C's of being an athlete or being a coach, and how you manage your life against the other teams. So from that perspective, I think it's, I think it's very different now. It's one of those things that when I sit and watch the games, I do shake my head and say, I think we do need more impartiality, objectivity. But, we unfortunately right now, not just in sports, but in life, we live in such a polarized world that it's almost tolerated, expected. I don't know what the word is. Listen, I do lots of Edmonton Oilers games. But if they deserve to be criticized, you have to criticize them. And I gotta, and I don't mind doing that. But I don't sit here and cheer for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, my follow-up was going to be, John, that I wonder if this is just a function of the world we live in now. Because I know that, from time to time over the years when I've criticized the Vancouver Canucks, like I've had people in my mentions or on email back in the old radio station days, like asking me, are you even a Canucks fan? Like the expectation is that they're hiring Canucks fans. And then moving out from, is it just that, people's brains they can't handle nuance anymore? They need the world in black and white and very little thinking. And
I think we've trained them, Matt. I think we trained them that way. I think sports talk radio has done that to them. Look at Pete DeBoer and Tim Collishaw last week in Dallas, where Tim Collishaw asked, I think, a very decent and fair question, and Pete went off on him, and then people take sides, and so I think we are in such a polarized state, and I do think that guys that are running sports talk radio or podcasts tell people, you want to grab clicks, have an opinion, be crazy. It's one of those things that you shake your head at, because objectivity is still very important when you're trying to tell us why a certain thing happens on the ice, why a certain thing doesn't happen on the ice. I look at the guys in the broadcast booth, and we're going to be able to watch Craig Simpson and Chris Cuthbert and Sean McDonough and Ray Ferraro, and I think they're going to play this thing right down the middle. They're going to be great, both great. And the thing is, with ABC, we're going to be able to compare the two. And I'll tell you what, now Ray Ferraro will get ripped for not being enough of an Oiler guy or being pro Florida, and Craig and Chris will get ripped the same way. And it's not right. It's not fair. And that's why you have to, at some point, forget about reading social media, because those people are loony bins.
Well,
that's
the problem.
I have so many follow-up thoughts here, but you're right. It has now gotten to the point where it's so tribal, where it's so delusional, right, that you're going to have that, so much so that I go back to what Middle Eastern correspondents say, that if your hate mail is equally Israeli and Palestinian, you're probably calling it as you should. Secondly, Collishaw is a old school, long time columnist there in Dallas. He's not bending knee for Pete DeBoer, and I saw that Pete DeBoer apologized the next day, or at least mea culpa, told the story of his wife getting after him when he got home about cursing a media member.
Wives have that tendency to keep back in line.
I mean, sure, Mrs. Price, much like Carmen, from time to time, you get home, you said what? You did what? But you say sports talk radio, and I think that's fair. I also think it's the regional broadcasts, John. They have gone very home.
And I'll go one further, John. I also want your comment on in-house media, because every team now has columnists, quote unquote, and are even going digital shows as well, much like our own, but with their own very pro club slant. And I think this just, again, breeds the one-sidedness, the subjectivity versus what we used to call media, which was objectivity.
Yeah. Oh, I it's part and parcel. I mean, I was at the league when we started to beef up NHL.com. And one of the reasons we started to do it was local media, local newspapers stopped covering the teams. It was the cost of travel,
right,
became a huge issue. So how are you going to get coverage? So you basically needed to create coverage, and that's a generation ago now. That has worked okay for almost every network in every league. It's baseball. I remember when I was at hockey night and in my early days, we used to just rip the heck out of local baseball. But Harry Carey loved before it was the Cubs, it was the Cardinals. And Hawk Harrelson loved the White Sox. And there was an expectation in those markets that those announcers cheer for the home team. And what's happened is the other two sports that have a lot of regional coverage, basketball and hockey, have followed suit. How many play-by-play guys on radio and television in both countries are employees of the team?
I was just going to say that. That's why it happens. Yeah.
That's why it happens. And there's an expectation. And that's why people like Cuthbert and McDonough have to stay the course, do their job, do it properly as they do professionally, and weather the storm, because they will get ripped at some point. That Chris, who, there's going to be an expectation, who got his real big break in television by moving to Edmonton, still likes the Oilers more than he likes the Panthers. And somebody's going to say, well, he hates the Oilers now. No, he's just calling a spade a shovel. That's what he's doing.
Well, it's funny because the pressures are twofold, John. The local broadcast team. You have the expectations of the fans, which, you're on our team, right? You're for us. But then we know this as well from the owner, executive, management, even the players, particularly if they're on the charter. Well, you're with us or against us, right? So they're caught in the middle. Of what is a dynamic that once again just needs it simple. Blue team, red team, where do you side?
Let me ask you this, John, and this is not a call because I don't want Luke Gazdic to lose his job. But I do wonder, does Francesco Aquilini rip off a phone call, or Jim Rutherford rip off a phone call about Gazdic's comment of, because after he rips the fans, he says, your team is a joke. Do you think there's offense taken by the Canucks organization that a Rogers employee is making claims like that?
Now, I can't defend nor criticize because I did not hear it, in fairness. But I would there's again, like Matt said, there are so many ways you can go through this. I think Luke has done a really solid job this year growing as a broadcaster. But what tends to happen is you start to feel your oats. You start to think you're cocky and you're better than you are. I call it the 5 phases of being a broadcaster. Phase 2 is the worst, and Luke's in phase 2 because you start to think you're the cock of the walk. If that was the case and that gets heard in the marketplace, I would hope someone from Rogers before Francesco Aquilini picks up the phone and says, I don't want to hear or see him on my broadcast at any point. And he has every right to do that, by the way, in the new world. I would hope that someone from Rogers would phone Luke and say, hey, Luke, before you do this stuff, you better think about it. You better actually understand what's going on and where you are. And that's a problem. I mean, hey, listen, Frank Saravelli learned that the hard way last week when he talked about, a certain aspect of the Canuck fan base. If I'm the Canuck fan base, I'd be mad at Frank for that too. So that there's There are so many ways to look at this. But Luke shouldn't be saying that if he said it, and someone should talk to him and try to massage it. Luke, how do you manage this now? Because you're not just a local guy anymore. You're a national personality, and you have to understand what that means.
Very astute on the 5 phases of broadcasting. Frankly, I'd like to hear the other 4, John.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Phase 2
Well,
for me,
the first one,
and you should have got a load of this one in Phase 2 as well. But
well, I'll tell you what, the Phase 1 is where you have a fresh approach. You're right off the ice or right off the playing surface, and you know the playbook, and you can talk about your friends on the ice. And so you have an insight none of us ever have. Phase 2 is you start to believe your own BS.
Mm-hmm.
You start to believe it.
Let me ask you this, though, John, because when I started in the business, and God bless them, and to be fair, this was mostly newspaper publishers and editors in chiefs more so than broadcast executives. But, they put their journalists in a bomb shelter, like they were going to fend off and do the Lansing. Like, we're in a world where Rogers is paying these Canadian teams, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And yet, Rogers is the client here. And yet you have teams that feel they can pick up the phone and dictate coverage. Like, how did we ever get there? Like, why wouldn't a Rogers broadcast exec go, thank you, Francesco, thank you, Gary, thank you, but we're paying you billions of dollars here.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make the decisions on who's on microphones. And if there's anything inappropriate, what the discipline should be. How did we allow teams and leagues to govern so much of the product?
Put in the contract. It gets put in the contract.
Yeah, the contract.
No better league of that example. No better league to do that is the National Football League. The National Football League has a lot more say than people realize about who does what and how they do it and where and when and how things are covered. It's right in the contract. You want us? Boom. You have to do it our way. It takes balls to be able to write it into the contract, but that's really it started to change in the 80s, guys, when really it used to be rights holders. There's a rights holder. Now it's a partnership.
Yes.
Now the partnership is the team saying, well, hold on, we want people to watch our games. We want people to come to our games. So we better put it in positive light. We don't want you ripping us all the time. The days of ripping Harold Ballard constantly, which we did at Hockey Night, we ripped Harold all the time, are gone. You don't rip owners anymore. You just don't. And Matt, there's a difference between journalism and sports broadcasting.
And that's the sad part. Yeah. But yeah,
there's a difference. And when I did work at the CBC and I was a CBC employee, the book, Standards and Practices book, was 2 inches thick. And it was one of the reasons, I really believe in the end, it was one of the reasons why the National Hockey League actually moved away from the CBC, because the CBC has a code that they have to live by where there is journalism.
Right.
And they wanted a partner. They didn't want a rights holder that would say and they didn't want. When I ran Hockey Night, we could rip the crap out of the league. And we did. We viewed ourselves in many ways as a gatekeeper of the game, of keeping them honest in New York. Like, don't steal our game from us. Wow, that world has changed a great deal.
How much do you think reporting?
McLean's interviews with Gary used to be terrific because he would press Gary on every topic, and Gary was feeling the heat because he'd reach out and want to grab Ron by the forearm.
Now,
right?
TSN doesn't have a ton of rights left, but
you live in a market where they don't have games.
Yeah,
Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal.
Yeah,
they do 240 NHL games.
Gord says he's never called more hockey than after they lost the national rights.
Right.
Do you think the NHL has broken off any phone calls to TSN about Rick Westhead's reporting? Do you think they've ever called ESPN about Katie Strang's reporting, that sort of stuff?
I don't
Because
know.
they do journalism, they tackle the tough stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure there have been phone calls.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I can't speak specifically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, they're you know, the job of the guys in the New York office and the Toronto office is to protect the game too. And if they feel the game is being skewered, they're going to make a phone call.
Because there's none of that on Sportsnet. Not to fully rip Sportsnet, but there is not an investigative report of getting down to the bottom.
Well, you know, in defense, I mean, I think Elliott works his tail off. I think Elliott works his tail off.
Hockey transaction insider. He's not going to break stories about scandal.
Yeah, and you've seen him demure on the bigger stuff.
Yeah,
the more sensitive stuff. And you're quite right. I mean, this is the world that Gary's want, that Gary and the owners want, and Gary and the owners have been able to fashion it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, particularly the owners. You know, rich guys really hate to be criticized.
Yeah, they do. They do. But
yeah, well, I mean, whole apparatus to stop all of that, right? You know, they send out nasty lawyers' letters, and you know, every rich guy tricking.
Well, I can tell you right now, I have never received a nasty lawyer's letter.
Really, Shannon? You haven't lived until you
good for
received.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
You haven't got your.
I've been fired.
Let me ask you. We tackled this already, but let's ask you. Is it just what the fans want, though? Like Matt and I and you can talk about the old years and the way that media used to be till we're blue in the face. But are we yelling at clouds? Do you think the fans want it the way that it is currently?
You know what, I have. If anybody listens to me with what I think about what the game's supposed to be, there's two things that people want. They want to see the puck go in the net, and they want to hear an announcer say he shoots, he scores. That's all they want. You don't think, see, I would add one more thing. Your team is great. I think they want to hear that.
Yeah, even when they're not.
I think they want to hear that. I really do.
Well, no, but
and it's sad. It's sad. Thing.
Well, I tell you what, then I don't. I think that I don't necessarily agree with that, Blake, because I think because the consumer now has a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So if the team is bad, he can rail on the team. He has a voice. And that's part of being a fan too, is being able to sit here and that's being able to sit here and living in Toronto and lament, you know, no cups since 67. And that's part of the allure at times of being so aligned with a certain team. You know, and I give Canuck fans a ton of credit. I think that they are as passionate as they are. They can be hard on the team too, and I think that those voices are part of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis and what the teams deal with on a day-to-day basis.
And it's almost two separate arguments, Blake, because if it is in fact what fans want at a regional level, that can work because everyone's in the same tent. On Hockey Night in Canada,
right?
Pretty big freaking tent. You're not going to be able to
for sure.
fan up for one side and be on the right side of the audience coast to coast. You know, it's a math problem.
Listen, I am an ardent supporter of some of those people. I think Chris and Craig will call it right down the middle. It'll be great. Sure. I hope the panel will call it down the middle and be great. And if they're not, then they should be criticized for it.
Yeah. We're 24 minutes in. Shannon, who do you like in this series?
Yeah. Right. They're playing hockey. Right. Yes.
I think it's another sweep, guys. I couldn't resist.
It's coming home, right, John?
It's funny, actually. I think if the Oilers win at 7, if the Panthers win at 5 or 6.
So right. Yeah, I can see that.
So it's funny. I do some work in Winnipeg, and I write for the radio CGOV website, and I wrote a story about how important it is for the Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. And I will tell you right now. So I write every week. I write every Friday on their website, and get very few comments on things that I talk about. This article I wrote last Friday was the most comments I have received ever. And I would tell you that 9 out of 10 people did not care that it was a Canadian team in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
And they only care about the Canucks or the Leafs or the Jets or the Senators or Canadians or Flames.
As a born and raised Winnipegger, I can tell you how many times Wayne Gretzky's Oilers put aside the Jets' dreams of a Smythe Division exit. So I think that's where that came from.
Right. And all I'll have to say is, 24 good minutes on objectivity in the media. Do you know what kids at the School for Sports Media would pay for that lecture?
Right.
From John Shannon.
Yes, you
And
can
he
use
just
this.
gave it to us for free, John. So
If you want to use it in school, though, we need royalties.
we are the richer for it.
They get it every week, Matty.
That's John Shannon. John Shannon, the College of Sports Media, if you're interested, and once upon a time a TV executive as well.
Thank you, John.
Great.
A long time ago.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well.